Hello, folks, and thanks very much for joining us for optimizing online engagement with MetroQuest. We're so glad that so many of you had interest in this topic, and we're looking forward to today's webinar. My name is Dave Biggs, and I'm the Chief Engagement Officer here at MetroQuest, and I'm pleased to host today's webinar and walk you through how to optimize online engagement using MetroQuest. We're going to jump right into the program. We've got about a 30-minute program, and then there's going to be a Q&A afterwards. I'm going to start by taking you through the agenda. First, I'm going to cover really what inspired us and continues to inspire us in building and maintaining the MetroQuest platform. Then I'm going to go into how MetroQuest is particularly optimized to meet some of the goals that we've learned from agencies across the country. And I'm going to spend a bit of time going through a live demonstration of MetroQuest, including how it looks to the public, as well as how to set it up and how to analyze the results to get the most out of your online engagement. And then we're going to have a Q&A session at the end. So if you notice the question box in your GoToWebinar panel, anytime during the webinar that you have a question that comes up, just simply type it into that question box, and we'll get to as many of them as we can during this webinar. And any of them that we don't have time to get to at the end of the webinar, we'll follow up with you directly. So I want to begin by just giving you an outline of the things that inspire us to improve public engagement. Essentially, and we've now been in business for over 20 years, we've seen very typical patterns and needs in terms of online engagement, in terms of engagement in general. Now, there's three main challenges that we hear repeatedly. The first one is really about the public meeting process and how there's so few people that seem to come to public meetings. In fact, it seems to be declining. I now am to understand, based on many surveys, that the average attendance at a public meeting is 9 people. So if you don't have a very good turnout at your public meetings, you're not alone. It's happening across the country. People are becoming more and more apathetic or more and more busy, and people are having a very difficult time getting people to come out to live events. And as a result, we've kind of nicknamed these people the STPs, the same 10 people. I don't have a great acronym for the same 9 people, but low turnouts are happening all over the place. The next issue is really about the fact that people need such a great motivation to come out that you tend to only hear from the people who are either motivated by anger or fear, and those are the people that tend to make it out to public meetings. And so if you do have a public meeting that is well attended, chances are there's a lot of people who are fired up and angry. And the last area that we hear repeatedly is traditional surveys, like online surveys that you see, tend to be a little bit too simplistic for complex planning issues and tend to be a little bit dry for the public. So there isn't a great deal of participation that tends to happen in those surveys. So these are the challenges that we've been hearing repeatedly. We've been involved in this, as I mentioned, for 20 years, and as a result of that, we've been doing a lot of best practices research with a great deal of agencies, planning agencies, transportation agencies, as well as public participation groups. And so that's given us a really great perspective on what's working, what's not, and what some of the best practices are. Also, we're very lucky to have some great clients across the country, and so with our clients in state agencies, local agencies, as well as the consulting firms that work for those agencies, we have our ear to the ground in terms of what's working and what's not, and so I'm happy to share some of those best practices with you today. So over the years, we've done a great deal of kind of polling for needs and goals for agencies, and this is what we've heard repeatedly. Agencies are looking for critical mass to support their decisions. They want to know that enough people have participated that they can justify their plans going forward. Secondly, not just numbers, but we need to ensure that there's a diverse participation. So we've heard from all demographics that are relevant to the planning issues at hand. Number three, we need to trust that that input that we're gathering is informed. And as I mentioned, simple sort of multiple choice surveys tend to not be educational enough to trust the information coming in when you're dealing particularly with complex planning issues where there's trade-offs and so forth to be dealt with. And lastly, quantifiable results. It's one thing to collect a whole bunch of written comments, but it's another to stand up in front of council or decision makers and summarize the input that has been heard. And so we try as much as we can to make sure that the input coming in can be quantified and presented to decision makers in a well-organized way. It's really this sweet spot right in the center of these that we're targeting with MetroQuest, trying to achieve the most participation, maximum participation, as well as ensuring that the results coming in, the input coming in is trustworthy and useful in planning documentation and when presenting the results. And we think that that is the combination that will generate the most actionable results out of your public participation. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about how we have optimized MetroQuest over the years to maximize on those goals. Firstly, maximizing participation. And I'm going to cover these at a fairly high level. There's all kinds of things that we've built into MetroQuest in order to ensure the maximum participation. Here's a couple of them. Making sure that the software is delightful to use on any platform, that it's custom fit for that device is absolutely important, because it's people are using devices of all kinds, and oftentimes we find that some online engagement can be kind of clunky when using, for example, a smartphone. Mobile technology is becoming so important that your site needs to be not only useful but delightful on online engagement using a mobile device. So making sure that that the experience is finger friendly and delightful to use. We have found that that when we started out with mobile support, about 30% of people instantly started using mobile to access the software. Now we're seeing projects where in excess of 50% of people are using mobile devices, so that's growing quickly. Also, making sure that the experience is short, because we're trying to get the people who are maybe less motivated, who have a short amount of attention on the problems, and we've found that about 5 minutes will give you the most participation, but also collect the most input from the audience. And so that's a kind of a sweet spot that we try to optimize for. So the entire experience from beginning to end, about 5 minutes is a great goal to achieve. And lastly, in the kind of getting lots of people to participate, try to make the experience as fun and delightful as possible, because remember, we're trying to get people who have less interest and are not as motivated as the people that might show up at public meetings. And so try to create something that's fun and easy to use is very, very important. The next section is really about, can you collect information that you can trust? And there's a couple of different dimensions to this. As I mentioned, having informed input is really important, but also having quantifiable input is absolutely critical. And so what MetroQuest does is a little bit different from a multiple choice survey. We essentially create all these different games that you can put out to your public to have them learn about the different options and trade-offs associated with planning decisions, and then provide input into the planning process. And so we've essentially gamified different ways of collecting input, where the public is learning about, for example, different scenarios before they're providing input on which scenarios they prefer and why. And even in budgeting, where you can play games like balancing a budget or allocating coins to different areas or visual preference surveys, it's all about creating that kind of fun and interactive experience where people don't even feel like it's homework. They're enjoying themselves and they're providing quantifiable input as it's coming in. We feel that those two things, that maximizing participation from a broad demographic, but also creating and bringing in informed input in a quantifiable way, is the secret combination that will give you actionable results, the results that people will use and trust in their planning decisions. And so I'll take you through in the demonstration, I'll take you through a little bit about MetroQuest's dashboard called Studio, where you can go in and analyze the results that have come in and use them directly in your reports. So let's do that. So essentially, I want to take you through a brief demonstration of the three phases of building a MetroQuest site. First, there's a setup phase where you're going to choose different screen types and populate it with your own content, and then you're going to launch it to the public and move into the engage phase and present it to the public and have the public interact with it. And then you're going to move into the analysis phase, where you're going to take the results and to try to draw out what lessons learned and put them into your reports. So let's do that now. I'm going to switch over to a browser, and first I'm going to show you how it looks to the public, and just so you get a sense of what the finished product looks like, and then I'm going to go in and show you what it looks like to set it up, and then how the analysis works in the end. So I've chosen some example sites here. You see I have a few tabs open. This Belmont Bridge project was a particularly interesting project because there was a lot of contention about how the bridge needed to be designed. It's a fairly small scale project, and they were concerned that there wasn't enough people going to participate, but they were also concerned that they might be planning things in a different way. I really like this one because in the end, they got so much participation that they learned that actually what they were thinking about building was not what was needed of the community at all. And they ended up building a bridge that was far less expensive, that met the needs of the public even more. So let's just go through it. The welcome screen just kind of gives you a brief introduction into the project. You can learn a little bit about what the project is all about, and then you can go into what we like to start off most surveys with is, what are your priorities? That really sets a great tone for the public about that it is about them and what they want to achieve. And so here you can see that we're being asked to rank our top priorities. So these are fairly simple questions, but they also get you a lot of really rich data because people are having to rank order these things, and they understand instantly that there's trade-offs that need to be made. We can't prioritize everything all at once, and so there's a subtle messaging that's going on with this screen, and it gets you some really high-quality data. The next interactive screen is about trade-offs specifically, and so this is really where you can help educate the public about the nature of the choices that are in front of them. Here we're looking at different specific trade-offs that the planning process needs to deal with. Are we going to focus on moving cars or moving people? Where do you put yourself on that spectrum? So people can put themselves on the spectrum and consider these choices, and you can see that people are gaining an appreciation for the nuances around planning while they're doing this. I really like the visual preference survey in this one, where it really helps people feel like they're co-creating the design, where they're addressing questions like, what should this look like? What kind of lighting do you prefer? All kinds of very interesting questions. And then the last screen typically asks people a few questions about themselves, so you can collect that demographic information of who you're hearing from, and also ask them a few other questions. Interestingly, people will give you this information at the end of the process, where they might not if you hit them with this requirement right up front. So let me take you through another couple of examples, and I'm not gonna go through each one of these in detail. I just want to pull out some stories from some screen types that I think you'd want to consider when thinking about what projects you have coming up and how you might use these different interactive screens in order to engage the public in a fast and interesting way. This one is a very interesting comprehensive plan for Chester County. I love these pictures and how they were just asking people, what kind of character do we want to preserve in our, in whether it's infrastructure or lifestyles, open space. All of these issues are really interesting, and I think that by getting people kind of visually engaged, it really helps to take a fairly dry and distant subject for a lot of people, a comprehensive plan, and really makes it quite real for them. I also like this interactive map screen where they're asking people in different categories to identify what they like and dislike about different areas. So you can go in here and you can say which areas you prefer, which areas you think need a little bit of extra work, and you can write a comment in there. Typically, we'll have 10 to 20,000 map markers placed on the screen, and you'll very easily see where they're kind of clustering and where you have problem spots and where you have areas that people really like. I like this one. This is a project for Westport, in Connecticut, and it was a really contentious project where they were dealing with the gateway for the town, and I think they really helped to de-escalate some of the tension that was out there by helping people see that there was very interesting and attractive options for how they could evolve this area in a very attractive way, and they were engaging people, for example, on visual preferences using a screen like this. The scenario screen I love because it does a great job of helping people understand that there's both pros and cons to every decision. And so it's a great way to educate people about different alternatives. In this one, in this Nashville example, they were looking at different alternatives for expanding the transportation system, and you can see that there are pros and cons for each one of these alternatives. You can see these red and green arrows moving around and the map changing when you look at these different options, and you can see that there is no perfect scenario. There's always trade-offs, and so when people are engaging in this and saying, yes, I like this scenario, they're doing so with full awareness that there's both positives and negatives about it. So it's an educational process that I really think is powerful, and it only takes a few minutes for people to participate. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of learning that happens in those few minutes, and I think that the input that is gathered from these sort of things is really quite credible and useful. I like these sort of examples when you think about participatory budgeting and these sort of things. So how would we raise money, in this case, for a park plan? We've got all kinds of different options, and we've got a budget that we need to meet. So here we can go in and we can look at different ways of raising the funds to meet the budget of this particular park. I can fiddle around with these things until I balance the budget. There, I've got 100% of my budget allocated, and I've learned about these different funding mechanisms, and you can see that you're subtly communicating to the audience that there's limits and trade-offs and choices to be made about, for example, how to fund things. I like this project here. It's an active transportation plan. It's got some very interesting and interactive screens that I think carry a lot of messaging. This screen asks people to allocate a budget to these particular areas, and as you can see, as I start doing this, I really want to allocate this budget here, and I start to run out very quickly, and you realize that there's scarcities involved, and so it's a subtle, again, communication about there's limitations, where should we spend our resources. Really, really nice messaging there, and some good quality data comes out of that. And then based on those choices, you can go in and you can look at specifically what kind of strategies do you prefer in order to make some of those changes take place. so you can dive into a little bit more detail, also very quickly. And then the project screen, I think, is great because it really helps people understand here are specific projects that are being considered. And each one of them you can click on, learn a little bit about, and decide whether or not you want to fund it. And you can actually add up how many projects people have selected, or you can add up the amount of budget that they've spent and keep them within a budget. So a lot of learning happens during these exercises, and I think it's really important because if one of the criteria that we've heard so many times is to collect informed input, and we have to do it in 5 minutes, we have to come up with really clever ways of packing as much as we can into that 5-minute experience. And so I just wanted to show you some of those examples. I promised to show you a little bit about the setup. So when you have a MetroQuest subscription, you will be given this dashboard. This is the dashboard of all of your sites that you have. These are the sites that you have in your build phase, so you're developing them. And then there's sites that have been launched and are in the analyze phase as well. So with that, if you want to establish a new site and build a new site, you can simply order it, and then it will give you, as I mentioned, a series of different screens to pick from, so you can create your site on the fly. So for example, if you wanted a trade-off screen or a visual preference screen, you can click on that and add it to your site, and it shows you down here a little bit more information about each screen type and its requirements and its benefits. Once you have your site together, here it is in kind of its draft format, and you can see that I have selected the trade-off screen here, and then the task is simply editing it. You can edit the words simply by typing them in here, or you can edit the images simply by dragging and dropping the images in. So I want to switch this image. I'm going to use that image instead. So I've made that change. So it's fairly easy to kind of customize these with your own content on the fly. And then once you've got it all ready to go and you launch it to the public, then you can start to see the information coming in. So I'll show you a quick look at what the reporting side of things looks like in MetroQuest Studio. So here you can see how many participants have been achieved, how many people have participated. You can track your participation as your project is going along and kind of use that to maybe adjust your advertising campaigns and your outreach to achieve certain levels, and you can see how different campaigns are working effectively. You can also then once your project is finished or along the way, you can see how people are weighing in on these different, which, for example, priorities are ranking high, how people are voting on, for example, different scenarios. And you can even look at the demographics. So, for example, you might want to see what the age range is of the people who have participated. So here we can see that we've got a very nice distribution of people from all different age groups that have participated. You might want to see what zip codes are represented, so you can see if there's any over or underrepresented zip codes, so you can go in and you can maybe target some underrepresented zip codes. This one looks like it's engaged quite a few people from all of these zip codes. And so, you can just sort of become satisfied. All of this data you can download in Excel format if you have further manipulations you want to do with it. This data that we're looking at here is our own proxy data, because obviously we wouldn't want to show particular results from an individual client, but I just wanted to show you how the reporting side looks. And I'm going to switch back and I'm going to show you some examples of what the reports look like. But first I'm going to cover a few promotional ideas, because MetroQuest is great in that it's fun and interactive and people tend to share it with each other and the participation grows. But in order to get things started and to keep things going along the way, promotional campaigns are really important. After the webinar today, we'll be sharing with you a guidebook that we've created that has some great promotional ideas for you on how to run effective campaigns, so stay tuned for that. I'm going to cover them at a fairly high level here, just a few of the top ideas. It's always great to have a clever concept. This particular campaign for Nashville, I just love this. They have all these little images that they shared with people. All right, Nashville, it's time to pick. They were picking their future scenario, and I think it was a really great campaign because each time one of these images came out, the participation just spiked. Then we've got obviously website and email, which is important. There's all kinds of ways of getting free press, so campaigns that attract the 10 o'clock news, always important. Social media, and there's all kinds of ways that we can highlight about how to use social media effectively. Even putting kiosks in public spaces so you can actually go and kind of target the populations that might be underrepresented, and even have pop-up events where you might go to an event that has been planned by another group and set up a table and target a demographic that might be a little bit underrepresented in the participation. So some high-level ideas on promoting your public engagement. Circling back to where I started, I hope that in this quick run-through of MetroQuest, you've seen how we maximize the participation, but also ensure that the information being collected is trustworthy, informed, and quantifiable, so you can use it directly in your reports. I've pulled out some examples, some of the examples that I've shown here today, and just to give you an idea of some of the results that you can get. So, we're really proud of the numbers of participants, 9,000 participants, almost 7,000 participants, but also, look at this example here. This was a traffic calming study for a pretty small area in a small town, and they had almost 15,000 images that were rated about traffic calming techniques that people preferred. So a massive amount of participation, and people were able to place them on maps and show where they needed traffic calming measures. So fantastic kind of results, and this kind of rich data is the kind of thing that gets us really excited, because we know that that kind of data becomes very actionable when you present it in reports. Is quite convincing that we really have heard detailed information from the public. In the end, it usually ends up being presented before council or decision makers, and we've got all kinds of great examples of really nice reports that have been created using the results, sometimes plucked right out of MetroQuest and plunked right into a report. For example, where comments have been made in different categories. Here's where walking and biking issues were in this community, and so forth, how priorities were ranked. So making these reports look really attractive and making it fast for you to take the information from your online engagement and put it into your reports and your PowerPoint presentations. Before we open it up for Q&A, I just wanted to share a little bit about what we've heard from clients back, because we're always trying to engage our clients and asking them questions like, what kind of difference did MetroQuest make for you? And the information that we hear back from us is very instructive for us, because it helps us understand what the priorities of clients are going forward. So, for example, in these interviews, we heard from the Atlanta Regional Commission. They engaged over 7,000 people in their first time out with MetroQuest, and we're really excited to see that was way more than they anticipated, because they had done multiple choice surveys in the past and received a lot less participation. In fact, they went on to engage over 25,000 people in this process, and I love these infographics that they produced as a result of what they heard from the community, because it's really a great way to kind of give back to people about what they've heard. I love this comment, and we hear this a lot. It gave courage to the elected officials. And it was almost with relief, with data, finally with data. We're going to share with you the video because we got these folks on camera at the last American Planning Association conference. We're also collecting information about how much people spent per participant, because that's really important, because sometimes the public engagement can be very expensive, and we're very, very happy to when we see the numbers for MetroQuest down in the single digits like it was in this project, where they essentially tried so many different things. And we're finding with the annual subscriptions that we offer that the price just keeps going down, because the first project you might have $3 per participant, but the next one is pretty much free, because you can use it as many times as you want through the year with no additional cost. And I just want to remind you that following the webinar, we're going to send you the recording for the session, so you'll have that. We'll also send you the slides, so you can see those in more detail at your leisure. We're going to be sending you, as I mentioned, that beginner's guide which has information on online engagement and best practices, as well as promotional ideas. And we'll send you that video, the short video that we produced interviewing people about what they got from the process. And I do want to mention that we have a webinar that is going to feature the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments. They had some really fantastic approaches that they use for their long-range transportation plan that we want to share with you. And with that, we're going to go into a Q&A. So let's monitor the question box there, and we've got a couple of questions that have come in already, so I'm going to dive into those right now. So the first question, on average, how long does it take to set up the MetroQuest website? So if you're talking about a MetroQuest site for a particular project, so once you have your annual subscription, you can begin setting up sites right away for projects. Typically, it really depends on how ready you are with the content that you have. So if you have the kind of the words and images worked out, and you can make decisions quickly on which screen types are going to be most effective, then the actual mechanical process, as you saw from my demonstration, is very fast. There might be a bit of a learning curve the first time you do it, and we're happy to provide you all kinds of video resources and help along the way to get the training that you need to do it the first time. But I would say probably set aside a couple of days to get a site together, and of course that doesn't include the discussions that you would have internally about the content and that sort of thing. We find as you do it more and more, that time frame goes down even more. So other questions here. How long do you recommend having a site live for? Well, we typically find that most clients choose 2 or 3 months as a good window. If you track the participation, you'll notice that most of the participation happens within the first month, unless you have different campaigns and promotional strategies that start kicking in. So for example, in the first month, you might get the attention of the local news station, and all of a sudden then you'll see a spike, or maybe a blogger will write about you that's got a big audience. And so there's all kinds of things that can happen over the few month period. But I really do like limiting the amount of time, because it gives people kind of a countdown. They need to do it right away, because if people get the impression that it's open forever, they'll probably put it off. But if you say that it's only open for another 10 days, they might feel that sense of urgency. Another question here, how can we avoid abuses like ballot stuffing? So I guess what's being referred to here is, what if somebody tries to vote 500 times for their favorite whatever it is? So there's strategies built into MetroQuest to notice when that's happening and to nullify those results. So just so you know, it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, it's pretty easy. It stands out, and we're tracking things that are invisible to the user, like IP addresses and that sort of thing, which will help those stand out. There's a number of other patterns that you'll notice if the abuses are happening, but I don't want you to get too bent out of shape. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does, you've got strategies for nullifying those results. So the good question, because unlike some other systems, we don't require people to create an account, because most people, 9 out of 10 people, will just not do it. So we want to try to maximize participation. So we're having all of those kind of systems up here in the background for people, so they don't even notice that it's happening. Because we want that begin button and nothing standing in their way to participate, because when you only have 5 minutes, certainly you're not going to spend half of the time signing up and providing your email and that sort of thing. Next question here, and probably the last one that we'll have time for live today. Do you notice a difference between the types of people who participate online and who shows up at public meetings? Well, generally speaking, we find that public meetings tend to be a bit of a filter for people. You have to be pretty motivated to come to a public meeting, or you have to, have a lot of time on your hands. But the people who tend to show up are the people who are motivated to attend, and they tend to be the super engaged folks, the usual suspects, or the people that are particularly bent out of shape about the plan and that sort of thing. And that's why increasingly we find that public meetings tend to be a bit of a battleground for a lot of agencies. So we are subsetting when we have high barriers to participation. We're subsetting the audience dramatically if we're only using public meetings to see what people think. When we have a low barrier to participation, like a 5-minute fun and interactive online experience like MetroQuest, we find that it's much more the general population that participates. We get a much broader demographic that is involved, and we have in addition kind of people who are a little bit more moderate in their viewpoints. With that being said, no matter what you do and how perfect your online engagement is, there will always be some gaps that you might want to fill in. And that's why we always recommend evaluating along the way who you're hearing from and who you're not, so you can then target some of the underrepresented populations with some of that boots on the ground effort that you might use by going to an event where there's an underrepresented population and so forth. But with tools like MetroQuest, you can get kind of it's not the 80-20 rule, it's the 95-5 rule, where 95% of the people will be happy to show up online, and then 5% of the people you might have to spend a little bit of extra effort to go and engage. So with that, I'm going to wrap up today's session. Thank you very much for your time. I know there's questions that we weren't able to get to, but I wanted to respect your time that you've given today. We're going to get to as many of those with the follow-up as possible. Thank you very much for taking a little bit of time today to learn a little bit more about MetroQuest. I hope you enjoyed the session, and we'll see you again soon.